Hey everyone, and a big thanks to LitRPG Reads and Paul Bello
Fine fellow.
for sharing this awesome article on some of D&D's, well, more, shall we say, unconventional races. Sure, elves and dwarves are classics for a reason, but sometimes you're itching to really shake things up in your campaign.
Right.
And speaking of shaking things up, you wouldn't believe what happened in my last game.
Oh.
One of my players decided to roll up a changeling rogue. We're in the middle of this tense negotiation with a shady merchant. And bam, my player decides to shapeshift
Oh, wow.
into the merchant's long-lost twin brother. The look on the merchant's face,
Oh, my God.
priceless. It totally derailed the encounter
Wow.
in the best way possible.
I bet.
So that got me thinking, why choose to play one of these weirder races? What's the draw for both players and dungeon masters?
Well, picking a race that's a little off the beaten path can really inject some unexpected energy into a party. It's not just about stats. It's about embodying a whole new perspective. Like seeing the world through the eyes of a sentient construct or a creature that can literally shift its form at will. It challenges you to think outside the box, which can lead to some truly memorable role-playing moments and campaign twists.
Okay, I'm sold on the outside-the-box idea.
Yeah.
But let's get specific. What are some of the tangible benefits of playing these less common races?
Well, the LitRPG Reads article highlights several advantages. For starters, these races often have these rich, compelling backstories just waiting to be explored.
Oh,
They come with unique origins and histories that can be incredibly inspiring for players who love to craft detailed character backgrounds.
like take the Githyanki, former slaves of mind flayers who carved out their own place in the multiverse. That's an amazing starting point for a character.
Exactly. And it's not just backstory. Mechanically, these less common races often bring unique abilities to the table. Things you wouldn't find in your standard human or elf.
Right.
This can add a layer of strategic depth and tactical surprise to your gameplay.
So you're saying choosing a less common race can actually make your character more effective in certain situations.
Absolutely. For example, a changeling's shapeshifting doesn't just make for fun role-playing scenarios. It can also give them a serious edge in social encounters.
Okay.
Mechanically, this could translate to bonuses on deception checks, or even allow for creative uses of disguise kits. It becomes a core part of their toolkit.
That's a great point. I hadn't thought about it from a mechanics perspective before. But what about from a dungeon master's point of view? How can these races inspire fresh campaign ideas?
Oh, the possibilities are endless. You can weave the unique cultures and abilities of these races into your storylines in incredibly creative ways. Imagine a campaign centered around the Kuo-Toa's ability to manifest gods from their beliefs. That's a recipe for some truly mind-bending adventures.
Okay, you've got me hooked on the Kuo-Toa now. We have to talk more about them. But first, I think it would be fun to do a deeper dive on each of the 5 weird races the article highlights. They're all so intriguing, and I know our listeners are dying to hear more about them. Where should we start?
Let's start with the Githyanki. They're a perfect example of a race whose unusual history and abilities can lead to incredibly compelling stories.
Okay, the Githyanki.
Mm-hmm.
As we mentioned, their backstory is wild. They were enslaved by mind flayers, fought for their freedom, and developed these incredible psionic powers in the process.
Right, and their psionic abilities are more than just cool powers. They're a manifestation of their will to resist mental control. A Githyanki player could explore themes of mental resilience and the struggle against oppression, which adds a whole other layer to their character.
That's so true. It's like their powers are a symbol of their freedom and their refusal to be dominated.
But let's not forget their culture. They travel the Astral Plane in these amazing silver ships, which sounds like the start of a space opera campaign. What kind of stories could we create around a Githyanki character?
Think about the possibilities. You could have a Githyanki warrior seeking revenge against the mind flayers who enslaved their people, or a Githyanki monk striving to master their psionic powers and find inner peace. Or imagine a Githyanki rogue using their telepathic abilities to infiltrate enemy strongholds and steal valuable artifacts.
Whoa! Suddenly I'm seeing all sorts of Githyanki-themed adventures unfolding. But I'm also curious about the Changelings. Their shape-shifting abilities just scream intrigue and espionage.
Exactly. Changelings are masters of disguise and deception. They can blend into any crowd, assume any identity, and manipulate social situations with ease. But their shape-shifting goes beyond the superficial. It forces us to ask, what does it mean to have a fixed identity when you can change your appearance at will? That's such a fascinating concept. It really makes you think about the nature of identity and how much of it is tied to our physical form. How would a player even begin to roleplay a changeling character?
Well, a changeling player has to think about their character's motivations and goals. Why do they shapeshift? Is it for personal gain, to protect themselves, or to help others? They also have to consider the social and emotional consequences of their actions. How do other people react to them when they discover their true nature? Can a changeling ever truly form lasting bonds of trust?
Those are some heavy questions. It's like playing a changeling is a masterclass in exploring the complexities of identity and trust. Okay, we've talked about Githyanki and changelings, but this article mentions 3 other unusual races that I'm dying to discuss: Aasimar, Kuo-Toa, and Warforged. They're all so different, and yet they all share this sense of being other, of existing outside the norms of traditional fantasy races. I'm so excited to delve deeper into what makes these races tick, but I think we need to take a little break first. We'll be back soon with part 2 of our deep dive into the weirdest D&D races.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the weirdest D&D races.
It's been fascinating unpacking these unusual D&D races with you so far.
Right?
I know, right? I'm already sketching out character ideas. Before we jump into the other 3 races, though, you mentioned earlier that choosing a less common race can really challenge our assumptions about what it means to be a hero or a villain in a D&D world. Can you elaborate on that a little? I'm really curious to hear more.
Absolutely. When we step outside the familiar archetypes of elves, dwarves, and humans, we're forced to confront different perspectives, different ways of interacting with the world.
Right.
Take the Warforged, for example.
Okay.
They're sentient constructs built for war. But what happens when the war ends?
Right.
Do they simply become tools gathering dust? Or can they forge their own path, find a new purpose?
It's almost like they're a metaphor for veterans trying to find their place in civilian life. It's a really thought-provoking concept.
And then you have the changelings. With their ability to shapeshift, they challenge the very notion of fixed identity. If you can be anyone, how do you know who you truly are? And how can others trust you when your appearance is constantly shifting?
It makes you question the nature of trust and perception, like how much of our identity is tied to our physical form versus our actions and choices.
Precisely. And then there are the Kuo-Toa, whose ability to manifest gods from their beliefs raises even deeper questions.
Yeah.
About the nature of reality itself.
Whoa.
If our beliefs are powerful enough to shape the world around us, what does that say about the power of faith or delusion?
Okay, that's getting a little too existential for me. But I do see your point. These races force us to grapple with some pretty big questions.
Right. That's part of what makes them so compelling, both from a storytelling perspective and from a philosophical one.
All right, I'm ready to tackle the next 3 races. I'm particularly intrigued by the Aasimar. They're described as beings touched by celestial power, with a connection to the divine. What does that mean in practical terms, both for players and DMs?
Well, on a mechanical level, Aasimar often possess radiant abilities, like healing powers, or the ability to channel radiant energy for attacks. But it goes deeper than that. Their celestial heritage gives them a unique perspective on the world. They're often drawn to fight against darkness and evil, but they also struggle with the temptations and complexities of the mortal world.
That sounds like a recipe for some intense internal conflict.
Exactly. An Aasimar paladin might wrestle with their oath, questioning whether the rigid tenets of their order align with their own sense of justice. Or an Aasimar rogue might use their celestial charm to manipulate others for their own gain, justifying their actions as a means to a greater good.
I can see how those conflicting impulses could lead to some fascinating role-playing scenarios. What about the Kuo-Toa? You mentioned earlier that they can manifest gods from their beliefs. How does that work exactly?
It's one of the most bizarre and intriguing aspects of their race.
Okay.
Kuo-Toa are incredibly susceptible to suggestion and prone to delusion. Their collective beliefs have the power to literally shape reality around them.
Wow.
If enough Kuo-Toa believe in something strongly enough, it can manifest as a physical entity, often in the form of a bizarre and monstrous god.
That sounds like a nightmare for a DM to manage.
Yeah.
How do you keep a campaign grounded when reality itself is constantly in flux?
It's definitely a challenge.
Yeah.
But it's also an opportunity to create truly unique and memorable encounters. A DM running a Kuo-Toa heavy campaign has to be flexible and willing to embrace the chaos.
Right.
You could have entire dungeons that shift and change based on the Kuo-Toa's beliefs, or you could have the party encounter a god. That only exists because the Kuo-Toa believe in it.
Wow, that's mind-blowing. It makes me wonder what happens if the Kuo-Toa's beliefs start to conflict with each other.
That's when things get really interesting.
Oh boy.
Imagine 2 factions of Kuo-Toa each worshiping a different god. battling for control of their reality.
Oh my.
It could be a recipe for epic showdowns and truly bizarre twists and turns.
Okay, I'm officially adding Kuo-Toa to my list of must-play races. Let's move on to the Warforged. You described them earlier as sentient constructs built for war. What kind of challenges and opportunities do they present for players?
Warforged are fascinating because they blur the lines between living beings and machines. They possess a spark of sentience, but their origins are artificial.
Right.
This creates a unique internal conflict for them as they struggle to understand their place in the world.
It's like they're constantly questioning their own existence. Are they tools? Are they individuals? Do they have souls?
Exactly. A Warforged player could explore themes of identity, purpose, and free will in a really profound way.
Wow.
Imagine a Warforged fighter who rejects their programming and seeks to forge their own destiny, or a Warforged cleric who struggles to reconcile their mechanical nature with their faith.
Those are deep themes.
Yeah.
It sounds like playing a Warforged is almost like a philosophical exercise.
It can be, but it can also be a lot of fun. Warforged have a unique perspective on the world that can lead to some hilarious and heartwarming moments.
I'm starting to think that these weird races aren't just weird for the sake of being weird. They each offer something truly unique to the D&D experience, both in terms of gameplay and storytelling.
I couldn't agree more. They challenge us to think outside the box, to explore new ideas, and to create stories that are truly memorable.
I'm ready to dive into part 3 of our discussion, where we'll explore even more of the lore and mechanics behind these fascinating races. Welcome back to our deep dive into the weirdest D&D races. We've covered a lot of ground already, from the Githyanki psionic prowess to the existential questions posed by the Kuo-Toa's belief manifestation.
Exactly.
But I think there's still so much more to uncover.
Oh, yeah.
Especially when it comes to the lore and mechanics of these unusual races.
Yeah.
So let's dig deeper. Where do you want to start?
Let's revisit the Githyanki.
Okay.
Their history is as rich and complex as the Astral Plane they call home. Remember, they were once enslaved by mind flayers, a truly terrifying race of psychic aberrations.
Oh yeah, the mind flayers talk about nightmare fuel. But the Githyanki didn't just escape their enslavement. They rose up and shattered their chains. And that struggle shaped their entire culture.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
They're fierce warriors, deeply distrustful of outsiders, and incredibly skilled in psionics. Their powers are a direct result of their history, a way to resist mental domination and maintain their hard-won freedom.
It's like their psionic abilities are a symbol of their resilience and defiance. I bet that makes for some intense role-playing opportunities.
Absolutely. A Githyanki player could explore themes of paranoia, the constant vigilance against mental intrusion, or the burden of carrying the weight of their people's history.
And on a more practical level, how do their psionic powers actually work in the game?
Well, Githyanki have access to a unique set of psionic spells and abilities, allowing them to teleport short distances, communicate telepathically, and even shield their minds from intrusion.
Oh, wow.
It gives them a distinct edge in combat and social situations alike.
So they're not just powerful, they're tactically versatile too.
Yeah.
I'm starting to see why so many players are drawn to them. Okay, let's shift gears and talk about the Changelings. Their shape-shifting abilities are just so cool.
Yeah.
But I'm curious about their origins. Where do they come from?
The origins of changelings are shrouded in mystery, much like their true forms. Some theories suggest they're descended from fae creatures, touched by the magic of the Feywild, a plane known for its unpredictable and often whimsical nature.
That makes sense. The Feywild is all about illusion and transformation, so it's easy to see how changelings might have inherited those qualities.
Yeah.
But how does a DM handle a changeling player who's constantly shape-shifting? It seems like it could really disrupt a campaign.
It definitely requires a bit of collaboration and trust. Between the DM and the player, the DM needs to establish clear guidelines for how and when the changeling can use their shape-shifting abilities, while the player needs to be mindful of not overshadowing other players or derailing the story.
So it's all about finding a balance between the changeling's unique abilities and the overall flow of the campaign.
Exactly. When done well, a changeling character can add a layer of intrigue and suspense to a campaign. But it takes careful planning and communication to make sure everyone's on the same page.
Speaking of intriguing races, let's talk about the Aasimar. Their connection to the divine is something I've always found fascinating.
Aasimar are said to be descended from celestials, beings of pure light and goodness. They often possess a radiant aura reflecting their celestial heritage, and they're often called upon to be heroes fighting against darkness and upholding justice.
So they're like living embodiments of light and hope? That's a pretty heavy burden to carry.
It is.
Yeah.
Aasimar often struggle with the expectations placed upon them. Balancing their celestial nature with their human flaws, it can lead to some really compelling internal conflicts.
And what about their powers? Do they have any unique abilities that reflect their divine connection?
Yes, Aasimar often have access to radiant powers, like healing magic or the ability to summon celestial energy. But their true strength lies in their unwavering spirit and their commitment to fighting for what's right.
It sounds like playing an Aasimar is as much about moral choices as it is about combat abilities.
Absolutely. And Aasimar's journey is one of self-discovery and purpose, navigating the complexities of good and evil, and ultimately choosing their own path.
Okay, we've got 2 more races to cover, the Kuo-Toa and the Warforged. And honestly, I'm not sure which one I'm more curious about.
Right.
The Kuo-Toa, with their reality-bending beliefs, are just so bizarre. And the Warforged, with their philosophical struggles, are equally intriguing.
They're both incredibly unique and offer players such different ways to engage with the game. Let's start with the Kuo-Toa.
All right, the Kuo-Toa. We've talked about their ability to manifest gods from their beliefs, but I still don't fully understand how that works. It seems like you could easily get out of hand.
It definitely has the potential for chaos.
Yeah.
Kuo-Toa are incredibly susceptible to suggestion and prone to delusion.
Right.
Their collective beliefs are so powerful that they can literally shape reality around them.
So if a group of Kuo-Toa believes in a giant cheese-loving monster, that monster could actually come to life.
Exactly. Their faith, or perhaps delusion, is that potent.
Wow.
It's a reflection of their fractured minds and their desperate need to find meaning in a world that often seems chaotic and incomprehensible.
That's both fascinating and terrifying. It makes you wonder what kind of gods they would create.
Their deities are often bizarre and monstrous, reflecting their twisted perceptions and their fear of the unknown. It's a DM's dream, really, because it allows you to introduce truly unique creatures and challenges into your campaigns.
I can only imagine the kind of crazy encounters you could create with a Kuo-Toa heavy campaign.
You could have dungeons that shift and change based on the Kuo-Toa's beliefs, or quests that revolve around appeasing their strange and unpredictable gods. It's a whole new level of unpredictability.
Okay, I'm sold. The Kuo-Toa are definitely on my list of races to try out. But before we get too carried away with their weirdness, let's talk about the Warforged. They're sentient constructs built for war. Well, what happens when the war is over? That's the question that really fascinates me.
It's a question that every Warforged character must grapple with. They were created for a specific purpose, but now they're free to choose their own destiny. Some embrace their martial heritage, seeking new conflicts to fight. Others reject violence, seeking peace and understanding.
It's almost like they represent the duality of technology. It can be used for good or for evil, depending on the intentions of those who wield it.
That's a great analogy. Warforged are a reflection of our own anxieties and hopes about artificial intelligence. They make us ask, what does it mean to be sentient? Do we have a responsibility to care for our creations?
Those are some heavy questions, but it sounds like playing a Warforged could be incredibly rewarding, especially for players who like to explore philosophical themes.
Absolutely. A Warforged character can be a powerful vehicle for examining the nature of identity, purpose, and free will. They offer a unique perspective on the world, one that challenges our assumptions about what it means to be alive.
This has been such an incredible journey through the world of D&D's weirdest races. I feel like I have a whole new appreciation for the depth and diversity of character creation.
Me too.
A huge thanks again to Paul Mello
Fine fellow.
and LitRPG Reads for inspiring this deep dive. And to all our listeners, we hope this episode has sparked your imagination and encouraged you to embrace the weird and wonderful world of unconventional D&D races. If you ever played one of these races, let us know in the comments below. We'd love to hear your stories and insights.